Speaking of Paul Ryan, he did an interview with conservative radio host Bill Bennett where he mentioned, number one, that black people don't want to work. Stay classy, Paul. And number two, he pays homage to a white nationalist. He said, quote, "That's this tailspin or spiral that we're looking at in our communities. Your buddy Charles Murray or Bob Putnam over at Harvard, those guys have written books on this, which is, we have got to stop this tailspin of culture in our inner cities, in particular of men not working and just generations of men not even thinking about working and learning the value and culture of work. So there's a real culture problem here that has to be dealt with." According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a group that tracks extremism, the guy that he mentioned there, in glowing terms, Charles Murray, is a white nationalist who has used, quote, "racist pseudoscience and misleading statistics to argue that social inequality is caused by the genetic inferiority of certain people." Wow, man. I mean, I knew Paul Ryan was out there. I knew that when he was a kid, he masturbated to Ayn Rand. I know he's a loathsome guy. I know we call him Lion Ryan for a fucking reason. I mean, I remember during the 2012 election, just as well as anybody else does, the speech he gave at the convention, which was just riddled with factual errors. But this is even worse than I thought he was. So you're reading white nationalist books and you think that they make sense? Are you serious? That's extreme, man. This guy is off the spectrum to the right. And furthermore, the idea that people in inner cities, we all know what that's code word for, black people, minorities, people in inner cities, they don't want to work. And, I mean, the way he put it is even stronger than that. Men not working and just generations of men not even thinking about working. That is verifiably not the case. How many times have we gone over this on the show? I've shown you the numbers. First of all, the unemployment rate right now is what? 6.6%, 6.8%? So over 90% of the country is working. Who the fuck are you calling lazy? Over 90% of the country works and you're calling people lazy. But even of the people who are unemployed, the overwhelming majority of them are looking for work. So who's left to be lazy? You know, if it were true, if what Ryan was saying here is correct, then we would see an incredible fraud rate in our social safety net programs. And understand something, the social safety net programs in the U.S., they are the most meager of all of the modern industrial nations. France's is better. Britain's better. Australia, better. Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, the rest of the Scandinavian region, better. So we have the most meager one. But these guys complain like it's too big and people are cheating the system left and right. Well, if that were the case, then the Social Security disability fraud rate, for example, would be more than 1%. There's a recent USDA study. The Social Security disability fraud rate is 1%. And then they always, well, food stamps. Food stamps has a tremendous amount of fraud. Really? What's the fraud rate there? Recent study, 1%. There are these mythical characters that wake up every day and say, fuck you to life, and just sit on their fucking couch all day and watch ESPN. They're just that. They're mythical characters. And by the way, even if those people exist in a really tiny number, and hey, we can be fair and say maybe 1% of society, maybe as much as 5% of society does that, okay? I'll be overly fair to Paul Ryan. You still want to fucking cut the safety net that is 95% helping legitimate people who are just trying to get back on their feet? So you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to take one asshole and define the rest of the people who need the help by the one asshole. But this is just gross thinking, man. This is just hatred of people who are already struggling. Why are you hating those people? Why are you rigging the rules against those people? And Paul Ryan likes to call himself a Christian. Don't make me laugh. This is what Jesus would be in favor of? Which social safety net program would Jesus cut? Who would Jesus not try to help out of poverty? You tell me, Paul. I mean, nothing pisses me off more than this, because how many poor people do I know? How many poor people do you know that are the hardest working people you've ever seen in your life, and they still don't even make enough money to live a decent life? I know people who work 3 jobs. A friend of mine in college, he wasn't in college, but he was a friend of a friend. So I went to school with my buddy and his friend who wasn't in college but was working. He delivered pizzas. He did landscaping. And he also worked as a cashier. He did all three of those jobs. And he could barely make the rent. Poor guy. Busted his ass more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. He was always working. But Paul Ryan looks at that guy with disdain. Like he's lazy. Like, oh, well, he deserves to make that amount of money. Really? Wait a second. Your ass took how many days off this year? We have 365 days are in the year, right? Did you know Congress takes off over 200 of those days? I think the number's 239 to be exact. They took off about 239 days. You're not working and you're making well over $100,000. And you're going to bitch about a guy who works 3 jobs and can barely pay the rent, and you want to cut the little help that he has? Meanwhile, at the same time, you want to give a blank check in bailout money to Wall Street companies that made horrible decisions and bankrupted themselves? Really? Man, his whole worldview is backwards. Big government is fine as long as it's helping out already rich people who are white guys in suits and ties. But it's small government and rugged individualism and capitalism for everybody else.